Hey everyone, and we're live. My name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc Labs, and welcome to our next live webinar. Today's topic is really interesting. It's the future of caller authentication, and we talk a lot about a pilot that Doc Labs has been working on in collaboration with GSMA and Telefónica Tech, and we're going to talk through the pilot and some of the context and background to it. So thank you very much for joining us today. Given the engagement and kind of level of response we've been getting, it's not just me that's been kind of looking forward to this. It feels like we've been working on this for some months. So it's great to see you guys out there interested in this as well. For context to this session, and I'm sure it's something we all experience, most call centers have the same problem, and us as users have this problem as well. So we spend probably a minimum of 45 seconds and upward to many minutes just trying for those call centers just to figure out who we are and for us to prove to them who we are so we can actually just get on with the reason that we called in the first place. And these traditional methods that we use of knowledge-based authentication, what's your mother's maiden name, what's your pet's name, they're really insecure. They require you to part with personal info, which is not ideal for the user or for the organization who has the liability of holding that information. So in this live podcast, we're joined today by two very esteemed guests that we're really lucky to have, and like I say, that have been really pivotal on the POC project. We have Glyn Povah, who's the global head of digital identity for product development at Telefónica Tech. Glyn, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Nick, and looking forward to the conversation this afternoon.
Excellent. And we have Helene Vigue, who's the Identity and Data Director at GSMA. How are you, Helene?
Yeah, all good. Really excited to be part of this. Great.
And I hope I pronounced your name. I meant to check how I was to pronounce it, so hopefully I haven't insulted you in any way. Fantastic. So with the help of Helene and Glyn, they're going to kind of talk and walk us through the trusted caller identity proof of concept. And it's really going to show us how digital identity is going to potentially transform caller authentication, making it faster and more secure. So in terms of the structure today, probably relatively familiar to people that regularly join us here. It's going to be a session with, at the start, some context setting. So Glyn and Helene will run us through just the state of play today and why we need this. We'll then do a demo, which I'll run, and hopefully that will go well. And then we'll get into some Q&A from myself, and then we'll open it up to audience Q&A at the end. The session is going to last about 1 hour. If you have taken the time to join us today, thank you very much. If you're watching this live, you're watching this in Riverside, so please feel free to add some questions into the Riverside chat. And our glamorous assistant Francisco will gather up those at the end, and we'll ask those questions when we have some time. So I will now pass over to Helene, if you could give a brief introduction to yourself and GSMA, and then pass over for Glyn to do the same. Thank you.
Sure. So as you said, I look after identity and data at the GSMA, and we are the global association supporting the mobile industry. And in my role, I connect and support our ecosystem, that is the mobile operators and their partners, to solve digital identity issues that affect all industries. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Helene. So in my role, I'm a product director at Telefónica Tech. I've spent the last 20 years in telecoms and the last 10 years building out APIs that allow business customers and enterprises to access telecoms capabilities. We're now putting that on steroids, if you like, with a new program called Open Gateway, which is about more and more telcos coming into the market with standard-based APIs so that more and more of these capabilities can be exposed. And I'll tell you a little bit later about how we're using some of those in this proof of concept.
Fantastic. Thank you, Glyn. And I've just been reminded as well, we've got partners at TMTID that are providing a lot of kind of vital technology into this POC. So remiss of me not to mention those guys at the start. They've been fantastic partner in all of this, and we'll get into that as we go through the demo as well. And then I'll pass over to you, Glyn, just to kind of run through some points that I think will help the audience that are unfamiliar or not involved in telecoms every day just understand why this is important.
Great. So just to set the strategic context for why we're doing this proof of concept and how it sits in the broader telecoms world, and I know Helene's going to talk a little bit about the first point, but broadly we're seeing more and more fraudsters and scammers exploiting our channels, voice and messaging, to conduct their frauds, and that's despite huge investments being made across the industry in collaboration with governments to actually prevent some of these scams and frauds. But as a result of that, I think what we're seeing is diminishing levels of trust in our core products, and that's not a good thing. So we've definitely taken big efforts to actually look at what new capabilities we can bring to market, and helping our customers prove that they are who they say they are when they're using our voice or messaging products. And of course, today we're very much focused on voice as one of the core telco products, and of course we're talking about the call center context in terms of this proof of concept. But in terms of exposing some of those new assets, we've always had one thing that's been really unique to us as mobile operators, and that's the SIM card. And I guess the clue is in the name, subscriber identity module. So it is all about identity, and ever since digital networks were born back in the early 90s, that has been the way that the phone, through the SIM card, authenticates itself to the network hundreds of times a day. And I think what we're doing now is taking some of these capabilities that maybe we've kept a little bit secret to ourselves, and we're bringing those into new contexts with APIs and working with partners with new technologies, so we can leverage those capabilities and those kind of combined solutions to improve the experience for our customers, whether those be business customers or consumer customers, and by so doing, bring back trust to mobile communications. And I think to focus, to take that strategic context and apply it to what we're doing in this POC, which has a very kind of clear and defined scope, we kind of thought about this voice context in a very much call center context. I think what's really super exciting for me about being involved in this POC and having great partners like DOC and TMT and GSMA is we're actually addressing something that's really never been tackled before in the way that we're addressing it. And that's really, in its simplest form, is providing a cryptographically secure way for our consumer customers to prove that they are who they say they are when they're speaking to a call center agent or navigating an IVR with any brand that they want to do business with. There's some traditional methods in telecoms that are widely used. So one of those is called CLI, or caller line identity. What that means is when someone calls you, more often than not, you'll see their number presented on your phone, and the same is true in a call center context. The agent will see the calling number presented and shared by the customer. Now, in previous times this worked pretty well, but now we have more open networks and more interconnections with other networks, and technology has advanced and changed, and scammers have become more adept at exploiting vulnerabilities. It's now become, I guess, reasonably trivial to spoof CLIs, and that means that scammers can conduct impersonation frauds. And therefore, we need to move into new capabilities where we can deliver much better security levels and security contexts, and ideally cryptographically secure presentations and authentications. And I think if you look at the problem we're trying to solve here, it's a really big problem. We've got about 2/3 of calls that go into call centers are driven by customers. So that's at least 2/3 of those calls where customers want to prove their identity, authenticate themselves quickly and securely. And each time, on average, they're spending around 4 to 5 minutes going through a process. As Nick mentioned at the start, it could be knowledge-based or combined with things like SMS OTPs or secret passwords, secret codes, and that can be quite cumbersome and slow. So we're really trying to tackle that and look for a better solution that's future-proofed for the next decades. And so just to summarise what we're trying to deliver with our proof of concept in terms of the solution, 3 things really. Faster authentication, so that's significantly reduced time for callers to be verified and therefore lower cost for business. Stronger security, so mitigating the risk with some of the fraud vectors I mentioned, so things like fraudulent SIM swaps, phishing, CLI spoofing, and of course stolen data, which is one of the big ones. And enhanced privacy, and I think this is a really important one, and where we can really leverage some of the decentralized identity tech, allowing customers to be more in control of their own identities and credentials, and share information in the way they want to share it without necessarily providing all that information to call center agents when it's not required to complete the task.
Thank you, Glyn. And I think, Helene, just to kind of give more context around the kind of threat landscape itself and the role that GSMA and others can play, it'd be great if you could give us a little bit of context and insight as well, please.
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to expand on the points Glyn made at the start, which is that we see the fraud rise, and in particular impersonation and impersonation fraud and scams. And this is a problem that really we believe the mobile industry needs to tackle, and it's a huge problem. We've been working for a couple of years now with the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, and they've estimated that the losses were over $1 trillion in 2024 globally. And only about 4% of that is recovered. So it's huge losses, and it affects a lot of people. We probably all know that from personal experience. We know someone who's been affected, but it was incredible that over half of the adults worldwide said they'd been victim of a scam in the last year. So it's really a sizable problem, and call centers are one of the places that get affected by this. And it's not just a problem from a financial losses perspective. I think there's also what we call a hidden cost on victims. I think that I've got some stats on this, but the victims report emotional effects. It's been measured that they get more anxiety, depression, insomnia, you name it, because of the scam they've been victims of, and that's pretty obvious. But sometimes we in businesses we might think of the financial losses, but the cost on the victims obviously really huge. And so our industry feels like it's got something to do about this. It's not just the cost on the victims. It's also the fact that it's been exposed that this fraud is now conducted in a very industrialized operation manner. There's call centers established. In particular, some of them have been exposed in Southeast Asia. They involve human trafficking, and it's the human cost again is absolutely huge on this side. So we feel that this problem is really something we need to do something about, and it's accelerated now that AI is making synthetic identity fraud easier. It's easier with Gen AI to automate identity creation, make it seem more real, and then learn from what's working, what's not working to produce more of the fraud that works. And so in that context, we see that call centers need to protect themselves, because either fraudsters might be trying to take over an account, or they might just use this as another vector to get information to feed into their scam schemes. But irrespective, there's really a big problem there on this channel. And on this backdrop of fraud, as the GSMA, we're supporting the mobile industry to act and play its part. I don't know if you want me to expand on this, but...
Helene, did you want to keep going, or did you want me to kind of start running the demo now and dig into a bit more of those details afterward?
Maybe I just last word on the role of the mobile industry. And I think, Glyn, you said it, but it's about online safety and trust. It's about restoring trust in telco services. We see the voice channel being exploited by bad actors for social engineering, and we're combating it. So as Glyn explained, there's been the use of the mobile phone as a bridge between our physical identity and our digital identity. It's something that's not new. We've seen the phone being the key that secures some of our digital interactions. The very basic example is SMS one-time password. And the mobile industry has been looking to make more tools available that help with digital identity challenges. Glyn mentioned the telco APIs. There's been huge momentum on these, and they help digital services with giving them access to mobile network data, mobile network authentication, to have faster solutions that can succeed SMS one-time password. But in the voice channel, when we're not on digital services, we're not on the web interface, we need that next generation of authentication, and that's what this project's looking at.
Fantastic.
Ready for the demo? Long intro.
Excellent. No, not at all. It's perfect. And I think the context is really, really useful. So we're going to run the demo now, and it's fairly short, but I think that probably says a lot about how usable and how simple this technology appears to the user. Behind the scenes, there's a good bit going on, and we'll talk through that. But let me kind of run the demo now, and you guys will get to see it.
For prescription queries, press 1. For appointment scheduling, press 2. For test results, press 3. For all other inquiries, press 4. Before we can discuss your account, we need to verify your identity for security purposes. You should now receive a notification on your mobile device in the Truvera Wallet app. Please open the notification and confirm your identity by clicking the Confirm button. Thank you. Your identity has been verified successfully. Please hold while we connect you to one of our healthcare advisors.
And that's it. It's as simple as that. So maybe a lot of build up for something, but it just shows you how quick and easy it is. And so rather than having to go through and reveal private information to a call center operative and that company holding that data, we have this very simple notification of kind of yes or no. Yeah, it's really interesting. We may well open up, there's a POC running just now, it may well open up, so we might be looking for more people to take part. So if we do decide to do that, then we'll certainly let people know. But that was a demo, and I'm glad it worked. Glyn, any kind of thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think like you, Nick. First of all, it's super quick, right? So I think we've shown that you can present a cryptographically secure credential and authenticate yourself in less than 45 seconds in the demo. And that's compared with, a usual customer journey that might take 4 or 5 minutes. You speak to the agent and you get asked 3 or 4 knowledge-based questions, some of which you might not remember the answer to. And again, you might need to be sent an SMS OTP to prove possession of the device as well. So taken together, all of that is quite cumbersome. And I think the demo, it is slick. It's maybe a little bit too quick to see all the steps. So I guess what might be nice is if you could kind of explain a little bit what's happening behind the scenes in each of those steps. I mean, the starting point, which is not shown in the demo, is that the mobile operator, so that could be an O2 or a Vodafone or an Orange, for example. In this case, we're using UK and Telefónica operating companies. In the POC, the operator will issue a credential as proof of the ownership of the phone number, and that will go into the Truvera wallet, which is provided by Doc Labs, and that's kind of the first step, for the trialists. And once they have that in their wallet, they can then use it in the journey that you just showed. But I guess what would be maybe useful to the listeners would be to explain a little bit about how the decentralized identity technology is working behind the scenes to make that very slick user journey possible.
Yeah, happy to. And it's kind of interesting actually getting asked questions on this, which is definitely a different position for me to be in. But I think, one of the key things that we see here is the difference between a centralized and decentralized approach. And I think we're all very used to centralized ways of delivering identity, where identity data of any type is stored on like personal data and things like that is stored in centralized databases that's ultimately controlled and kind of looked after by third parties. And decentralized identity technology typically would put that onto the device of the user or under the control of the user. And that's what we're seeing here. So data is stored at the edge. And typically this is in an app. This is the Truvera app. But it can also be in a browser-based wallet as well. It can also be embedded in somebody else's application to save individuals downloading lots of different apps. And then implemented correctly, of course, this can be very privacy preserving. So if there's data from information that maybe you don't want the call center operative to know about yourself, they don't need to know anything. You can literally just present them with the exact piece of information that they know. So for example, if they're asking me to confirm who I am or confirm my name, I can literally just send that information to them. I don't need to add any other information that's within that credential. I can just keep it very specific, which we call selective disclosure. So I think that's a kind of interesting thing that this technology brings, the fact it's decentralized versus these kind of centralized approaches, Glyn.
Great, and I know that in the decentralized world, there's a kind of unique new lexicon that everyone uses, which I guess some of the people on this call will be familiar with. A lot of my colleagues in the telco community won't be familiar with, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of those people dialing in today. Could you explain what the different roles are and how that's working with our POC and who's playing those roles?
Yeah, the three main actors that you would often see, it's often when you basically say to Google or some AI or something like that, explain decentralized identity to me, it always gives you this diagram of these three actors, and it's the issuer, the holder, and the verifier. And so the issuer is typically an organization that is, as the name suggests, is issuing the credential, the piece of cryptographically proven data. It could be a KYC credential. And in this case, it's actually in the POC, it's the mobile operator that's issuing the credential here that contains information about the holder. And the holder, Glyn, is as you know, the recipient of the credential, and it's the person whose device this information is going on, and it's the end customer, if you like. And they are then sending a verifiable presentation, so they're presenting the credential that was issued by the mobile operator to the third actor in this ecosystem, which decentralized identity kind of lexicon is the verifier, but old world identity would consider to be the relying party. And so they're presenting the ones that are benefiting and getting the information and relying upon that information to provide services to the holder. And in this case, CareLink Health, which is the fictitious healthcare provider, is the verifier of this information, or the relying party. And I think the important thing here, again, because of this decentralized nature, Glyn, the verifier is able to confirm the validity of the credential without direct contact with the issuer. Whereas in most other cases, they would need to go back and check, look, did you really send this? Who did you send it to, etc. Because of the cryptography that's used in the technology, they don't have to do that. They can verify the credential without speaking to the issuer, which is very powerful.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nick. And thanks for demystifying all of that for us. I guess one of the bits of feedback I've had from a few of the testers is the user. I mean, it sounds quite complex behind the scenes, but actually I think the user experience is quite nice. And I know that some of the feedback I'd heard is that it seems familiar in the sense that it's similar to kind of open banking payment authentications, where you're making a payment online, you receive a notification, you go to your banking app to approve it. So I think there is a degree of familiarity with the sort of customer journey, albeit it's in a call center context, but it's not kind of completely foreign to most people, I think.
Absolutely. I think as well, just important to point out, we kind of talk about some of the stuff that's behind the scenes, and I'll kind of open up to questions for Helene and Glyn in a second as well. But I think behind the scenes, it is simple, but we're using kind of technologies like the communication layer that's used. There's a lot. We use open standards as much as we possibly can here to make sure it's interoperable. We're not creating the data silos that we already have. We're trying to move very hard away from that. So we use open standards. So for example, when we're sending communications, like the way that the message is sent to the holder of the wallet, we use the DIDComm protocol, which again is open standards, use sending encrypted messages back and forward. We're also using this digital identity wallet here to secure and hold that data at the edge, and to make sure it's not needing to be held and controlled by someone else. These can also be accessed via biometrics as well. So for different levels of assurance, we can also ratchet up what we're looking for, just to make sure it's as secure as possible. And we're also using verifiable credentials in this process as well. And for the uninitiated, they're cryptographically signed proofs of identity, or in this case, account ownership. And like I said, we can also use selective disclosures here as well, where the holder can just send a piece of information, an attribute from the credential, to satisfy the verification request without needing to share all the information that's on the credential, which I think is very good, not only for the company, but also for the user, making sure their data is as private as possible. So I'm going to move into much more familiar territory for me and start asking questions again, which feels very, very good. So Glyn, maybe pass to you first, and Helene, please feel free to jump in at your leisure. Glyn, how did we talked about, like, what are the success metrics that we considered before starting the POC?
Sure. I think I'd probably articulate three, really. One was, we're pulling together lots of technologies here together that's never been done before. So, we've got the Doc Labs tech stack, the decentralized technology stack. We've got a bunch of capabilities from the telcos, which we're accessing via standard APIs. And thirdly, we've spun up a fake call center using Amazon Connect, which is one of the popular call center as a service platforms, and integrated all of these things together. And all those things together make the user journey that you saw in the demo a few minutes ago. So I think first success factor, can we make the technologies work together for the use case? Answer, I think yes. I think we've proven it, and the demo, I think, is good evidence for that. And then secondly, the users, of course. And there's two broad bunch of users or actors, if you like. There's obviously the consumers, so all of us who want to call different brands to speak to them about different problems or payments or issues we might have. And there's also the people that work in the call centers, of course, and the people that run the call centers. And this kind of technology obviously needs to work for both of those stakeholders. And that's, a key metric we'll be measuring as we roll out the POC, and we'll be sharing more of that at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in early March. And I guess finally, and probably in some ways most importantly, because I've always been working on projects, proof of concepts, where hopefully there is a business impact as well. We want to be sure that there is a positive business impact here. So, that means that there has to be a business KPI impact. So whether that's reduced call handling times, reduced fraud, better customer experience, these are the sorts of things we're going to be talking to enterprises and call center as a service providers about, as we get closer to the end of the POC, about how they see that from a business impact perspective, and how we can move forward into a more commercial rollout.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, and in terms of, I know that we're still partway through, we've just started kind of running through the POC, and this will continue for some time. So we have, I think it's fair to say, some fairly early kind of responses. Wouldn't quite call them results yet, but we've got a very small kind of number of people that have been through, and the results have been very positive so far. And Helene, maybe you can talk a little bit about, just based on what we've seen so far, do you kind of seeing some measurable improvements compared to the traditional methods that we spoke about at the start?
Yeah, I think on the various points that we mentioned at the start, in terms of the expectations, both for it to be faster, clearly, I think that was obvious, but also you talked about privacy, and I think that's one of those interesting things where we all live with the fact that we would love to have privacy, but we can't have it. I think, again, I think people perceive it in this context. It's in their hands, the fact that they have control about the data that they're sending. And I think that's an interesting message to educate users about how they can have this privacy, which I don't think we've really been on a journey to educate people. It's appearing more and more. We're seeing this sort of attempts to have identity wallets in many settings. But yeah, it's really exciting to see it in people's hands and to see the reaction. I think people get the concept around the privacy. And hopefully, of course, the security aspect, I think, with everything you've described are documented, and we can't measure it in this POC, but I'd hope that in a real business context, we would measure the decrease in fraud.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the privacy thing is interesting, just real quick, because I think there's, in some industries, it's common for the organization to want to hold all your data, because some industries make money from that. But for most companies, they don't want the data because it gives a lot of compliant risks to them. They have to secure the data, which is very, very difficult. So I think it's good for not only the individual because they don't have to reveal it, but the companies don't really want our data unless you're in the, kind of selling data industry. So I think that's something that's really good to see. Glyn, I know that you actually took a trip to, and I hope I'm not revealing too much here, you took a trip up to one of the call centers that you guys work with. just to observe the way the life is today for a call center operative, and some of the things that you looked at were kind of how long it takes for them to process calls and some of the other variations that they have to do with. What kind of quantifiable differences do you think that we'd expect to see once the POC moves hopefully into production?
Sure. I mean, I guess I did do those observations, and it was super enlightening for me to get to talk to some of the agents as well and really understand and listen to some calls. I think the main observation was obviously the time it does take to authenticate yourself, and that's probably easier for some people than it is for others. And we've all been through that journey ourselves. I've been through that journey myself, and it's different in different call centers, of course. But things like remembering long passcodes or particular digits of long passcodes, I think, can be particularly challenging. And then, of course, if you want to receive the SMS OTP, then you've got to wait for that to come in and then pass that back to the agent. That can take another minute or so. So I think what we'll be looking to do with this POC is reduce that time for customer authentication and getting them through security, taking away a lot of the knowledge-based questions, taking away the SMS OTPs. I think when I was Googling this before the show, I think the AI was telling me that the average call center cost per minute was somewhere in the range of $0.75 to about $1.5 per minute. So if we take around $1 a minute, right, what we're looking to do is take a couple of minutes out of this authentication process for every call into every call center. So I think on that basis, and also some of the cost, of course, with sending the SMS OTP. So with that, I think I would say it's encouraging that we have quite a compelling solution here to achieve that.
Yeah, fantastic. And Helene, do you have any kind of thoughts, or what's the kind of most surprising thing that you would say that you've maybe seen so far from the pilot? Anything that you'd expand on there?
I think it was surprising how the tech was not the hard part of the pilot. I think it sounds quite intricate. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but yet that seemed to be the easy part. I think getting this happening from an organization perspective maybe more tricky, but yeah, I was surprised by how smooth the technology integration seemed to be. I mean, I say that Glyn and you did the heavy lifting. It was definitely what impressed me in the first place.
And staying with you, Helene, as well, if I may, how would you see this new approach changing the security model for call centers, kind of based on these kind of knowledge-based questions or OTPs?
I think that I'd probably reflect on a bigger trend. This is not specific to call centers, but I think there is that move happening in a number of spaces where we see the push to have identity wallets to move from the model where we authenticate ourselves with the old models of identity. So I think the identity wallet story has taken ground. We've seen it in whether that's mobile driver's license in the US or whether that's what's happening in Europe. So some of it pushed by government. But of course, we also see these private wallets that have been becoming more prominent in the UK after the passing of the Online Safety Act. It's something that's becoming a little bit more mainstream, that people could prove their identity using wallets, or even if that's still maybe not a word that everybody would relate to, but an app on their device. I think this is a trend that we see happening worldwide, and I see this the call center example we've got here as one of these examples of moving to that security model. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's a really good point, Helene, because what we could find is a big part of adoption is educating users how to use the technology that we put in front of them, and actually, if they're starting to use wallets and getting used to credentials, whether they know that that's what they are. Through other use cases, like you said, with eIDAS 2 coming in at the very end of this year, this is going to become a more and more familiar concept to them, and actually could really aid adoption if we're using this increasingly familiar technology with users in different use cases. I think we're all probably going to help each other seed this technology. So that's a really interesting point. Glyn, going back to you, in terms of like practical terms, how would you see this? I mean, we talked a lot about the kind of risk, all the risks at the start, and almost felt like a bad news story at the start. There's so much negativity that can go on here. Risk of impersonation kind of being one from things like, just fraud generally. How do you see this kind of solution reducing that?
Good question. I mean, I think impersonation frauds are growing and growing, and we covered that briefly at the beginning, and so we want this solution to really kind of tackle that and bring those impersonation frauds down in a really big way. And I think we've heard from call centers that scammers are calling in and using all the exploits they have to impersonate their victims when they speak to call center agents, and in some cases withdraw large amounts of money. So I think with the solution we're putting forward in the POC, and obviously it will be under evolution as well. So version 1 will not be the version that lands in the market as we learn as we go along with this project. We're aiming to kind of bring those capabilities, your decentralized identity technology, the network capabilities, the SIM-based, root of trust. I think that's a really important point to cover. Is we're actually bringing a new root of trust into these ecosystems, which is based upon the SIM card. And I think if you look at where we are today, a lot of the root of trust is around the device, and that's really valuable, to be honest. When you think about our smartphones. Whether that's Apple or Google or other smartphone providers or hardware providers. I think there is a big role for telcos to play in being a root of trust with the SIM card, and therefore the risk signals that we have in our network. And with all of that put together, in this call center context, we believe that we're going to really significantly reduce the ability of fraudsters to do impersonation frauds, at least using the traditional methods.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think as well, we've talked a little bit about, access to personal data. And I think we were talking before, Glyn, about this kind of Coinbase example, and the money's obviously in crypto. The value of some of these token wallets is kind of eye-watering. And I think there was kind of cyber criminals kind of bribing support agents there as well. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how this new way of working using wallets could actually prevent some of those types of hacks from adversaries taking place.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Coinbase example. It's one that's maybe not so well known, but if you Google it, you'll find out what happened in Coinbase, which effectively was the scammers managed to bribe some of the call center agents, and they were capturing personal customer data as it was being shared into them from the customers into the call center, and then that was being used then for targeted social engineering attacks on those victims. And I guess with some of those victims having large crypto accounts and balances, they were able to withdraw large amounts of money quite effectively and quite quickly. And I think the number quoted by the company itself, Coinbase, last year was that they expected it to cost about $400 million to fix. And all of this really was a result of too much data being available and easily accessible to fraudsters through simple mechanisms, just like bribing employees in the call center, for example. So I think to your point earlier, Nick, it's actually good for many businesses to have less and less data, right? Because it becomes less and less of a liability. It's good for the consumers because they don't want their data sitting in different silos in different clouds across the planet, and it's good for many businesses that aren't data brokers to not have to hold that data, but still achieve all the business processes that they want to achieve. Do customer password resets, help them with their accounts, take payments. All of that can be done, authenticate themselves, of course, which is what we're doing in this POC. All of that can be done without necessarily sharing large amounts of data as is done today. And I think this POC is a great evidence for that.
Yep, very good. Thank you. And we talked about how simple the demo was, and Helene, just coming to you. And there's a lot of other things kind of going on behind the scenes. Helene, can you talk a little bit about things like carrier kind of network APIs help contribute to facilitating kind of a better verification process through the use of the POC?
Yeah, sure. So we talked briefly about what happens at the start when you first get your credential on your app. And of course, I need to receive the credential that's appropriate for me. And that verification happens because my mobile number is verified and that process is secured through telco API. So in short, I can't, on my phone hold your credential, Nick, and just put your phone number and say, yes, that's me. And when I call the call center, I present your phone number and get through. And that sounds obvious, but to secure that, the security of this is done in the background by calling an API that asks the mobile network to confirm that indeed I am currently in possession of this mobile number, the phone I'm on, and I'm installing the credential on or receiving the credential, and it has got the correct mobile number. So that's the key bit where we're using here one of those APIs are standard and available in many markets worldwide.
Thank you. And from a more general level, and I will move on to audience questions very shortly because I know there's actually a lot of them, so which is really great to see. So I'm keen to dig into those. Glyn, maybe you could make a quick comment around how easy or difficult maybe this technology was to implement. Was this a fairly straightforward process, or did it take many years?
But just before that, I think I wanted to just follow on from Helene's point about the use of telco capabilities and APIs. I think I talked before about the root of trust, right? Using the SIM card as a root of trust. And actually, if you think about all the information the telcos have about your phone number and your SIM cards, we process millions or billions of network events every day, and things like customers, porting out of the network, disconnecting, reconnecting, customers who just stop using their number, so therefore we recycle their number, and eventually that number will be available for another person. In other words, another identity. So I think in order to create that root of trust, we're also developing APIs real time. That is, where we can effectively revoke credentials that have been issued to customers by, for example, if a customer stops using their number, that number will be recycled. So a recycle event will generate a revocation of a credential so that when that number's seen again, it will be able to be issued to a new identity. And same for port out events. Okay, it's going to a different network. The customer might be keeping their number, but that identity credential now needs to be issued by the new network that's receiving that customer and that number. So we've done quite a lot of thinking about how we can really leverage the real-time nature and the security layer that's already present in our networks, and then bring that to bear upon this kind of root of trust, if you like, that we're creating, that's going to be the power behind this kind of solution in the market. Sorry, I didn't answer your question about the...
No, you did. No, it's perfect.
About the ease of implementation.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think the short answer was, and we covered it earlier, the technology part was actually pretty easy. Maybe that was surprising, or maybe it wasn't. But I think there's a level of maturity, certainly in some of these technologies now, whereby that was perhaps easier than we expected, and we've managed to get everything to work together really easily. I think when we get to scaling this up, I think the challenges are probably going to come more on the business side. How do we make sure that there's real business benefits here that we can really talk about, and the businesses can really understand that actually deploying these kind of technology, and that's just not for the enterprise customers, it's also for the mobile operators, right? So I think we're doing this in Telefónica with the partners you mentioned earlier. But of course, we want this to be a global solution that's deployed widely amongst all telcos, so that bringing trust back to communications is something that works, for 6 billion customers globally.
Yeah, fantastic. And it is amazing. It's always the business relationships and the legal stuff that's the hard part. And I'm not going to say the technical stuff is easy, because I think my dev team would literally kill me. But I think that it's something that we see that the technical stuff here has certainly seemed to be something that we were able to get through fairly quickly, which is really good to see. And Helene, kind of GSMA were kind of a key kind of sponsor and organization that really helped bring us all together through this POC and hopefully beyond as well. Maybe you could say a few words for those unfamiliar about how GSMA goes about supporting the mobile industry, and also maybe tack on at the end, if you could, if organizations want to get involved, want to find out more information, want to take part, how should they go about that?
Yeah, sure. I think Glyn just mentioned it. For this to be the best it can be, it needs to be available worldwide. We need all the mobile operators to support it. So how do we go about this? That's where the GSMA tries and play a role. We've run this project as part of what we call GSMA Foundry. This is where we fast track new ideas and pilots and partnerships to support innovation. But this is part of a much broader initiative to address the challenge of scams. This is one of the priorities for our industry. So we do a lot of activity to make sure that it's not just a shiny project somewhere, but it really is shared throughout the industry. We've got groups where we do knowledge sharing, and we also support a lot of cross-industry collaboration with the industries that are affected by scams. Whether it's we've got working groups, we've got events where we discuss the threats and actually share some of those threats. We work directly with the mobile operators to help them implement the basic network measures they need, the safeguard measures that will make sure that a lot of the scams don't even get to the consumers. But we also then, on top of this sort of built-in network technology, we showcase innovative projects, we help scale solutions. So a good example of another solution that's a little bit further down the track now, that started, like you mentioned, as a proof of concept, is our Scam Signal API. It's another an API we've got in the area of scam, started as a proof of concept, was expanded to full coverage in the UK, and then has grown from there to be in multiple markets. And this is very much where the GSMA plays a role, to bring the operators together, to help them collaborate in areas where they need to work together, not just compete, but also work together on the things they can for the benefit of the consumers and the enterprise customers. So yeah,
that's fantastic.
Come to us. We've got plenty of events, public events. We've got member events, and this is where you can find out more and get involved.
Yeah, and MWC is not far away, so you'll be fairly prominent at that in Barcelona. So if anyone's out there in the early part of March, then that would be definitely a good one to go to. I think just to kind of, before we get into audience questions as well, I think it's interesting when you kind of talk about other kind of pilots and things that are growing into kind of production level things. I think some of us in the industry have been looking for how do we get kind of wallets and credentials at scale into large, mainstream production, because it's a very complex thing. And actually what we might find is, alongside the IDAS, which is going to do it for citizen identity, you could have programs like this go into production. That's another way of having kind of wallets and credentials in users' hands at scale in a way that's very usable and simplistic. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. So that's the kind of main part of the kind of Q&A done. We're going to move now into audience questions. Thank you to Glyn and Helene so far, and we'll definitely be kind of leaning on you again as we move into the kind of next and final 10 minutes. Thank you very much if you did submit questions into the chat. And apologies in advance if I read your name out wrong as we start to work through these. So the first one is Alberto. Alberto, thanks for the question. Alberto is asking, the caller app, could it be integrated into any mobile operator app using the SDK? Is this the idea? So I could probably take that one to say, yes, you can embed the wallet as an SDK into any operator's app. What we did with the POC for simplicity and just to keep the complexity down was just to use a pre-existing app that we had. But that's absolutely the case, Alberto. So kind of insightful comment there. Extending onto that, Girish is asking, does the caller need to have an app on the phone as well? So yeah, they will need to have an app, whether it's a standalone app or as part of the operator's app would be dependent upon how it's packaged. Alberto is also asking, what is Telefónica's objective? Is it to use this tech internally or to offer it to the market as a service or to something else? Glyn, could you expand a little bit on that if you can?
Yeah, totally. And actually, our objective is very much to offer it to the market. So we want as many enterprises and consumer customers using this as possible. Helen mentioned a Scam Signal product that we've put out in the market, and that's been live, not just in the UK, but in many global markets now for several years. And so I think we'd like to follow that evolution with this product as well, so that the whole market can get the benefits as soon as possible.
Excellent. I think it's Howda is asking, is confirming what we know, that the one call center is going to likely manage multiple brands. How does this technology cater to that? I don't know, either Glyn or Helene, if you've got any thoughts on that question for Howda.
It's a good question, to be honest. I think that's something we need to explore further down the line. I mean, clearly that's a scenario that probably occurs quite often, where you've got big outsourced providers managing call centers for multiple brands. So clearly the management of the data and the customer bases needs to be carefully thought through, I guess, from a security context and perspective. And that's definitely something we'll be looking to address during the next phase.
Great. Ian is asking, how is the user verifying the call center is authentic before providing credential data? Again, Helene or Glyn, you want to pick that one?
I think this is a brilliant question. I think what it points to is like two sides of the same coin, right? So when I'm connecting with a business, they want me to prove that I am who I say I am. But actually, sometimes, actually more often than not these days, I want them to prove to me, and usually when they call me, but not always, that they are who they say they are. And I think we are working on a number of other projects, again within the GSMA Foundry, and Helen can talk a little bit more to that. So we do see this as kind of a holistic approach in terms of businesses being able to prove that they are who they say they are through branded calling, for example, or verified calling. So there'll be ways for customers to see on their handsets that they're the businesses that they say who they say they are, and equally with this POC the other way around. So I think great question. Thank you. Helene, do you want to comment any more on the business verification and verified calling? I
suppose you've covered it. There are solutions appearing already around branded calling in the market, but we are trialing what we could do to make this interoperable. We've got an innovation project that's specifically focused on that, how we could have calls where we know who the business is that's calling us. But there's another scenario here. How do we prove that the business we're calling is indeed the correct one? So that there's probably a multiplicity of scenarios and use cases to explore. I think that's very topical. A lot of work is going into this enterprise identity verification topic in the GSMA at the moment.
Nice, thanks, Helene. And Jorg is kind of asking, but I think it's kind of agreeing with the point that authentication is both ways, like you're saying, Glyn, and the caller is getting confidence that he or she is talking to the right kind of healthcare provider, which you kind of address with your comment about, organizations needing to identify themselves as well as the individuals.
Yeah. And to give an early example of that, in many of the markets globally now, there's a new messaging service which is on most Android and iOS handsets, which we call in the industry RCS, but actually from a consumer perspective, you'll just think of it as your message inbox on your smartphone. But more and more you'll see branded messages that are verified by the operator as those appear in your inbox. One example I have, which is a recent one, is HMRC, which is, for those of you not in the UK, is the tax office that likes to collect the tax and talk to you about filling in your tax return. So they've been sending me lots of messages as we approach the end of January to pay my tax. But they are now using branded messaging, so that's done in a kind of verified way. And I can go into my messaging inbox and see that that's been sent by them and it's been verified by O2 that they are the originator. So I think we'll be taking that same concept and applying it to the voice channel as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Glyn. Howda is also asking, is the telco issuing the cryptographically protected ID credential, the VC, through an API to the wallet of the holder end user? Glyn, do you want to answer that? I can pick that one up. Or
I was going to ask maybe if you want to pick that one up, Nick.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, so they will be familiar with, the telco will know the wallet address of the user, and so we'll be able to send their telco kind of customer ID credential direct into the wallet, and that will kind of appear as a VC, and that will be obviously controlled by the user. So the answer to that question is yes. Pierce is asking, are there any biometrics used to confirm the person using the phone is the authorized consumer or subscriber? So there's not at this point, Pierce, but it's absolutely, so obviously someone would just obviously be able to unlock the phone with the biometrics, but that's not kind of proving this within the presentation of the credential. What we can actually do in addition to this, which we have talked about, is you can obviously biometrically bind credentials inside of VCs as well. So you could actually have a VC that's the customer identity credential, and you could also have a verifiable credential representation of the user's biometrics. So it enables the biometrics to be confirmed without actually sending them in a credential and creating a kind of privacy or security issue. So that's not part of this, what we showed on the screen, and not part of the POC, but it's definitely an avenue for extending the kind of functionality, the features down the road for high assurance use cases. But a very good question all the same. Mario, from what APIs from the carrier are used, and in what steps are they in the verification flow?
Yeah, so very, very quickly on that, because I think we're hitting up against the hour. We're using our Number Verify API and SIM-swap API to check possession of the phone number prior to issuing the credential and making sure there's no recent SIM swaps. So we have a whole bunch of risk signals, as I mentioned, that we could apply to this, but because it's a POC, we're using a limited number to get started. But I think those are two very important risk signals and APIs where we can demonstrate real value from those network signals.
Very good. And as Glyn pointed out, we are at the top of the hour and we have run out of time. So I wanted to thank Glyn Povah, who's with Telefónica Tech, and Helene Vigue, who's with GSMA. Thank you very much for not only attending tonight, but also all the work through the kind of POC phase. Also, I will not forget TMTID this time, and thank you to Matt and all the rest of the team at TMTID for helping out. And also thanks to everyone who is either listening live or listening on demand. So this is the end of the webinar. We're talking about the future of caller authentication. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.